All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Podcast at 2.0. My name is Brian. I am your host. And today we're going to talk about the numbers. I am kind of a numbers guy. I like data. I like analyzing it. I like projecting. I like comparing. So it comes easy to me, and I understand it doesn't come easy to everybody. The first thing you're going to need to do is create a spreadsheet. Because in today's world of podcasting, you get data from multiple places. So, for example, I am broadcasting live right now on bullhorn.fm, and it has its analytics. I am not passing through to YouTube, Facebook, or any place else just yet. But I have analytics from Bullhorn. When this show ends, I'm going to download the video, download the audio, and schedule it to go out live-ish on Facebook, YouTube, and then the audio podcast will go out. So now I have numbers from Bullhorn, Facebook, YouTube, and the podcast. Now, the podcast numbers we can truncate out farther because I can log into Apple Podcast Manager and look at just Apple numbers for this episode. I can log into Google Podcasts and look at numbers just for this episode. I can look at my hosting account numbers and look at numbers for all episodes. But looking at Apple and Google, let me know, is there a fall off rate? Are people tuning in late? Do I need to drag out the first couple of minutes from the show because people really aren't jumping in for a minute or two once they get that notification that I am live? And or everybody just started falling off at 5 minutes and 23 seconds. Let me go back and listen to what I said at 5:23. Did I say something unintentionally that was off-putting? You can learn a lot from looking at the numbers if you take the time to look at the numbers. And in addition to that, we want to also take a peek at how many downloads. We might want to break down geography a little bit. In addition to that, I encourage my hosts to factor in their social media numbers to their overall media kit if they've created one. And by doing so, it's going to show that your audience may be larger than just those listening to the show. So having a spreadsheet, all your numbers in one place, and yes, it kind of sucks. You have to update this thing. I update a single spreadsheet for 19 shows every Monday morning. And it is laborious. However, at a drop of a dime, I can look at numbers many different ways. So we have a caller that wants to jump on, and it is Todd DeVoe, the host of a few shows. So we're going to add Todd to the call. Todd, welcome.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Are you on your cell phone?
I am on my cell phone.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about the numbers?
You know, the numbers are as I like to say, are a necessary evil, a daily struggle, and a monthly chore. And what I mean by that is that if you look at your numbers every day, like right after the show, it can be discouraging sometimes, right? Because you're like, oh my God, I only had like 30 people take a look at this.
Right.
And you go, oh man, like I've done all this work. Is this really working? And you can kind of, but then you take a look at the monthlies and you go, holy smoke, like over the month, this thing is like really, really done a lot, you know? And then weekly, you have to do your weekly report because if you want to get sponsors, or in some cases, like if you are a sponsored show, you want to show that your stuff is getting out there, and taking a look at all those different platforms is a chore. And that's the chore part of it. And I'll tell you from a personal story here with numbers. I started a Substack, which I do. Not only do I do articles in, but also a podcast. And I started off with like, okay, I transferred people over from one platform to the other, and most stayed, right? So I've transferred over like 1,080 800, like 1,800 and something. And then like one day or over a week or so, I lost a bunch of people. And this, guess what? There was, like, no big deal, right? And so I was like, oh man, it took it kind of personal. And then over the last, this is started November, just to kind of put in timeline. Yesterday, I took a look at my numbers, and I have 2,385 subscribers. Um, and I have a very good open rate. When I say that is, it's like a 47% open rate, anywhere between a 7 and 10% click through rate to my advertisers.
which is
Um,
well above industry standard. So by migrating your audience from a platform where your numbers, I'm assuming, were much less, to a platform where there's a little more engagement.
yeah, absolutely.
And I happen to know what you were using and what you moved to, but by creating that community on Substack, and this is not a paid sponsorship, we use Substack as well, and I love the platform, but by creating a more community like environment, your numbers are growing. And how is that affecting the listens to your show?
Oh yeah, the listens to my show have gone up across the board for all my shows, right? So the Substack show I do is specific to Substack, but the Todd DeVoe show's on there, Prepare Responder covers on there, and I share business continuity today as well on the Substack, and each one of those has grown.
So you have a show that you're using a Substack RSS, but then you also republish your podcast that's a traditional RSS onto Substack as well.
I don't republish the RSS feed onto Substack. What I do is I have a link back to um, the show either on like NDEM, for instance, the natural disaster, the Natural Disaster and Emergency Management Expo goes back to their website.
Mhm.
So it goes basically to the Spreaker player, and
So
then
you're not even uploading the audio as a post just on Substack. You're just in an article form, a written form of
yes,
content. You're creating a link back to.
yeah, absolutely, and
Cool.
like I said, those have like a 7 and 8% click through rate, right? Back to
Mhm.
those articles. So what that means is when I have somebody in the last numbers I could share with you, I had the last post I sent out, we had 2,000 people unique, even people that aren't part of my subscribers have opened it. So 2,000 unique people opened up the article, right? Out of those 2,000, I had a 7% click through rate for my links. And then it breaks it down to what they clicked, right? So each show on average is getting about a 2% click through rate. So you're getting, that means, you're getting 30 people listening to your show that way, which is 30 people that probably wouldn't have found it the traditional way.
Right, right. And now, why have you? And for those listening, I happen to know Todd extremely well, and he does produce some content here at Sitch Radio. Um, you just recently created or claimed your show on the Fountain app, correct?
Correct. I did that. Yeah.
And with that Fountain app being part of RSS 2.0 and on the Lightning Network, people can send you Bitcoin per minute they listen or send you boosts. Have you seen any movement there just yet?
Not yet. And that's my fault. And that's one thing too, everybody listening, that you got to take ownership for when things aren't going the way you think they're going. What I mean by that is I default to what did I do wrong? What can I do better? Not to, oh, this is piece of equipment's broken or sucks, right? Because it's all learning curve. And and sometimes you find that it is the piece of equipment that sucks, right? But if you take the approach that it's my fault first, you'll do much better in this industry. That being said, you introduced me to Fountain a bit ago. I signed up for it. I did what I had to do, and I kind of just like left it. And I haven't harvest or I haven't harvest. I haven't even sowed the seeds well enough on that platform to do well with it. So any um, poor performance on Fountain specifically is just due to my lack of engagement, and that's my fault.
Yeah, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with Fountain, it is fountain.fm. It is a podcast application, iOS and or Android. It is hooked to the Lightning Network, and to my knowledge, it is the only podcast player that is rewarding you, the user or listener of podcasts, by sending micropayments for every minute that you listen of Satoshi, which is the measurement of Bitcoin, to you, your wallet that was created for you when you signed up for a Fountain app account, which is pretty cool. And I mean, I've moved all of my podcasts over to Fountain that I consume, and again, it's not a lot of money. You're definitely not going to retire, but an hour long episode, because I've referred people to Fountain, I earn about 100 sats, which, again, not a lot. However, I can then turn around and gift those to the creators that I'm consuming their content as a thank you for creating the content they create, which is a cool way to say thank you.
I want to talk about a little bit about monetization. And do you have a second for that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I know you're a big proponent of monetization of content, and I'm on board, right? And I say this, and Brian knows the backstory, but just recently, specifically on Substack, it sounds like we are. I'm not getting paid by them by any means. But I'd like the platform, and I just turned on, kind of by mistake, to be honest with you. The story is actually kind of funny. The paid tier. I was kind of goofing around with it, just to see like what I could do with it, and then I hit save, and then it populated onto the page. So I'm under the pressure to have to create paid content. So that's actually a good thing, I suppose. And then, like, lo and behold, somebody the other day just decided to become my first paid customer on that site. So now I really have my feet to the fire to create paid content behind that wall. But
it is
I think
amazing that as a content creator, you're creating this content, and especially in podcasting and old school, you did it for the love of it. And Patreon comes around, and these other platforms come around to where you can gate it for monetization or monetize the content. And there is a subset of your listener base that so appreciates what it is you're creating that they will give you money in exchange for the content. And some of it is just out of gratitude. Todd here hasn't even created a piece of paid content yet, and somebody's paying him for the content he's been creating for years for free. So don't, yeah. And some of your listeners, some of your viewers, they're going to get upset that there's gated content now and they might leave you, but they weren't true fans to begin with. And what we're trying to do is create true fans. We're trying to create a community, depending on which direction you go. And somebody that's on the fence probably, you probably wouldn't want in the community anyway.
and mind you, everybody, I wasn't necessarily doing this to just to put up a paywall just for the paywall. We're actually putting content in development that will be a lot more work and a lot more exclusive. And what I mean by that is, for instance, I do a lot of work with authors. Some are on the New York Times bestsellers list, right? I mean, these are good authors, great authors in some cases. And we're going to have them behind that paid wall, so we can have a limited number of people necessarily to engage with them. And we're going to have in person, I say in person, well, we'll do it in person too, but also Zoom meetings with them, to where you get to interact with the authors of books, of great books. And so, yeah, it sounds terrible. You're like, oh, you're excluding other listeners or other subscribers that are free to listen to that. But we will release it at some point. It just, when you want to engage, I really believe that you should have that right, and that's why we're creating some of the paid content like that. And I think that's exciting, number one, and number two, these authors deserve to be paid as well. So I think that's the other side of it.
Most definitely. And we deal with imposter syndrome in podcasting, and I'm sure if you've been around long enough, you've heard the term. However, in my mind, there's two levels to it. There's, who am I to create a podcast, or who am I to create this piece of content? That's level one. You get over that, and now you're creating content. And then you come up to level two of, who am I to ask money for this content? And once you get over that hurdle is when you truly start creating that lifestyle of a laptop lifestyle that most creators have and or want to have. And by no means is this passive. Podcasting, creating content, titling, descripting, it takes time and it takes energy and it takes thought and work. But that's why I liken it to the laptop lifestyle. As long as I connected, have a machine and a mic and a camera, I can do what I do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why, and I feel like we're turning this into the Substack show. There's a reason why people have migrated to that platform. And what I find really interesting is that there have been some highly, I'm going through, what was that? There are some highly decorated, like Pulitzer Prize winner authors, not authors, but investigative reporters
Right.
and journalists that have moved over from working for the New York Times, for instance, Washington Post, another one, to the Substack platform. With obviously they're famous in that world. They have millions of viewers or followers, if you will, and they've turned that what they were doing to make stockholders and um, businesses rich, and I'm not trying to be anti-capitalist by any means by saying this, but now they're coming over to this other platform where they're able to make the money directly off of their labor, and I think that's exciting. And we democratize the idea of what labor is when it comes to content creation. And I really do believe that there's going to be more shift going that way, whether it's that platform or Patreon or whatever. Because even like YouTube, um, isn't a great platform anymore. There at the time where you can make money on YouTube, and that seems to be going away, and they're putting more restrictions up. From what I understand, there's a person who had in Bay Brian, I think you told me the story that they had ads on their um, on their show, and they got deplatformed. Is that? I think they told me that story, correct?
Yeah, they were demonetized because of the type of content they were creating, which again, as a podcaster, if YouTube demonetizes my show or boots me off of YouTube, I still have a show. And back to numbers, because I know what my numbers are per platform, I know exactly how much of a hit that's going to be to me. And I can tell you this, that as a podcaster first, the majority of my listens on the shows I'm involved in are in audio format, not the video content on YouTube or Facebook or any other platform. It's that audio listener who makes up the bulk of my audience, and in my opinion, they seem to be a little more loyal than video listeners. What's your experience with that,
I'm
Todd?
a flip on that, right? Um, I I grew I grew well. Let me rephrase that. When I when I moved to video, we saw a remarkable drop in the podcast downloads, right?
Hmm.
And I was like, oh wow, this is terrible, right? And I was stressing about it, right? Trying to figure out like what the heck am I doing wrong? How do I fix this? And then I started counting the numbers on two different platforms, LinkedIn and Facebook. YouTube, I haven't really done well. I mean, for whatever reason, it just hasn't taken off compared to the other two. I don't know why. I just, but it is. That's where
Well,
I'm
I,
at.
I think it's the type of content. Your content is doing extremely well on LinkedIn because it's
Yes,
business
that's what I was about to
related,
say. Yeah,
to where Facebook and YouTube combined don't make up half your LinkedIn audience.
yeah. LinkedIn, I'm crushing it.
You know,
Right.
and I can see your video doing better than average because the type of individuals consuming your content are sitting behind a desk, and when Todd's show comes on, they can click and watch live while it's happening.
That's true. Good point. Yeah, but I mean, like I said, LinkedIn, crushing it. YouTube, Facebook. Facebook's all right now. Um, that's another. Excuse me. That's another weird story on Facebook. I started a group. Um, I don't know. Like pretty quickly, I had a few hundred, like probably close to 900 people on it. and I didn't think anything of it. And then over the last um, probably 4 or 5 months, right? I mean, you get those numbers. I mean, I'm getting hundreds of people a week signing up for Facebook, and they don't even follow my writing anywhere. I don't know how they're finding me necessarily, which I wish I could get those analytics, but I don't have them. And that's growing, and I think that's why another reason why I'm growing on on the Substack, because we keep telling them, "Hey, come over to Substack to find more information," and we tease on Facebook and put the whole entire thing on Substack. But that's been a really great, weird blessing in disguise in a way. That Facebook is doing what it's doing.
So, because this episode is supposed to be focusing on numbers, when you started tracking your numbers across all platforms and creating totals in a column, did that set your mind at ease from the, oh my gosh, my audience shrunk?
Yeah, that's absolutely, yes. I think that was kind of my point, but yeah, it did, because like, matter of fact, we saw an increase in audience, right?
Overall, correct.
Overall,
Yeah.
yeah. Where I thought I was where thought I did something wrong and offended somebody who had a decrease in audience. So no, we had an overall increase in audience.
Yeah. And the cool thing is you dive into numbers even more. And again, like I stated earlier, if you see at 5 minutes and 23 seconds your audience drop, go back and listen. What was I talking about at 5:23? You now know never to bring that up again.
Yeah.
Or at a certain point you see a spike, go back a few minutes earlier and start listening to what you were talking about, because I've noticed that spikes in listenership are because people are loving what you're saying and they're sharing it out right then and there, and their circle of influence is clicking that link and joining
Hmm.
into the view or the listen. So it goes both ways. It could be good, it could be not so good. But if you do not take the time to compile your numbers, you do not look at individual platforms that give you listen time, and you're missing a piece of the pie that can help you grow your show.
Yes, yes, and and look at those one-offs and see like what you did that was that worked, right? I had a podcast the other day, or the other day. My daughter hates when I say that. Like 2, 3 weeks ago, and and all of a sudden I had like the biggest spike in a 1 day downloads ever, right? And I called Brian. I'm like, hey man, look at this. Like, and we're like looking at like title, how many times it's shared, all sorts of stuff. But every once in a while, you'll do something that really just resonates with listeners, and they'll share it out, and it gets out, and it's not quite viral, right? I always say I'm never gonna go viral with my content. I should say never.
But
Hardly
I mean,
likely.
in red, if you look at your numbers overall, if it does 2 3 times better than a normal piece of content, that's viral for you, and
That's what I
that's
say.
something to
Yeah, right.
celebrate. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think those are the things too. Is like, be realistic of what your um, audience is, or who your audience is, I guess, and like what your content is. Um, because like, I'm not a 20 something good looking person who dances and does stuff that gets things out, right? I'm a middle aged dude who's probably needs to lose, a few pounds, probably more than a few, to be honest, right? So I'm not going to get that like person, that, what do they call it? They call it like a thought now, or thought, whatever, thirst trap. I'm not, definitely not thirst trap. So I'm not going to get those numbers, right? But I mean, I do get the academic numbers, right? Because that's where I'm at. I'm in that region, that thing. Yeah, I'm a wonky guy when it comes to policy, um, and that tends to be who I'm going to get. I'm going to get people who are policy driven thinkers and need to or want to consume that content for work or for personal gain or for school when they're looking at policy. So I know where I'm at. I know my niche, and understand that, and that will also help you understand like, I'm not going to have 5 million downloads ever, right? So that is, if that happens, I think the world's in trouble. But you know what I mean. So understanding like where I'm at and what my victories are and how the other side of that too is if you're looking for sponsors, that will help you um, talk to them about what your niche is, what the audience will be, what your demographic size is, but also knowing like if you're in that niche and you're the expert that people are coming to, those numbers are critical for you to share with those that want to be sponsors because then they're going to go, yeah, yeah, this is the audience I want to be in front of, right?
You know, we
Um,
just, yeah, we just, to that, we just started a new show called Feed Drops, Linz and I, and you know, our numbers suck. We're less than 20 episodes in, but we intentionally put a media kit together right out of the gate because it might not be our podcast content that drives a sponsor or advertiser. They may go after our social media. And because I'm putting ourselves out there as, hey, we're a show, we have an audience, and this is what we do, you know, we are already in talks with a company to come on over and sponsor that show, which
I mean, you
is
guys are blowing up on TikTok, which is and you're not dancing,
right. Linz is
or
doing a great job on TikTok. He's crushing it on Twitter. We have almost a
Twitter.
thousand Twitter followers already, and the
Yeah,
account's not even 6 months old.
yeah.
Um, but you get out of it what you put into it, and tracking those numbers. Our media kit is pretty detailed. We even include our 7 subscribers on Substack. And yeah, seven's nothing to be proud of. However, that's 7 people that probably subscribe to the podcast and want our newsletter. So they're more of a true fan than somebody that just listens or somebody that just watches, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what? Again, as the thing is, don't let numbers be discouraging. You know, those 7 people, if they're like 7 super fans and they're sharing that information and other people are getting it, it will grow, right? I mean, you know,
Which
not to quote the baseball game, build it and they'll come. Yeah, they'll come when they know you're there, right? So it's not build it, they'll come. It's like build it and share the crap out of it everywhere, and then they'll finally find you. And you will find those super fans that will share the snot audio.
right. And those 7 subscribers are going to be more likely to share if you make it easy for them to share and you ask them to share as well, because they are more of a truer fan than not. So, you know, it takes a plan, it takes some strategy, it takes some repetitive ness in that plan and strategy to grow a show these days. But you know, there's, in my opinion, there's nothing to be embarrassed about by having low numbers. You know, we've got low listener numbers right now on that show. However, you know, on 2 social platforms, we're doing a pretty decent job. So somebody might come after us for just that.
Yeah, I think so. Um, I mean, that's what it is. I think at the end of the day, numbers can be scary. You know what I mean? Like you go, oh my god, like am I bad? That bad? Like it kind of can be demoralizing sometimes, right? But just understand that's just one matrix, right? It truly is just one
Right.
matrix, and especially if you're just starting out.
Well,
I
and
mean, and but here's the other thing too, and I'm gonna be real on this. Unless it's a passion project, right? Which some of them are, and if you've been doing it for a year and you're not seeing any growth, right? Um, Maybe it's time to evaluate what your subjects are or what your audience do you think it is, and maybe either switch gears or learn or turn it off because I mean Brian and I have had some shows um that just weren't successful. Yeah, that
yeah,
just weren't successful, you know. Um and it's a hard decision to make. It's sometimes it's like your child, and sorry about the noise if you hear background noise. Um it's like your child, right? You don't ever want to give up on it, but sometimes you do, and but those numbers allow you to make that decision with clarity. I think
yeah,
that's another thing too.
you know, and something else. This type of show isn't my normal show. I attempt to bring more energy to this show than I do other shows that I'm involved in. And that's me trying something new, trying something different. And it seems to be working. And I can only say that because I can go back and look at my numbers episode after episode, month after month. And now I can start to play with that strategy in my other shows and see if that changes. So yeah, if the numbers are showing you something's not working, before you decide to scrap it, switch things up.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. I
do
think I
do
said that
something
too, didn't
different.
I? Or did I allude to that, Brian, or did I just tell everybody to kill their show if it sucked?
Briefly, you kind of beat it around the bush, so I wanted to hammer it home.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not telling you that if the numbers are terrible just to kill it right away. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
work out the details of that. That's
yeah. I mean, and it's okay to try something, and if after a long enough time the numbers aren't showing that you're gaining anything from that effort, then try something new. I mean, at the end of the day, this is your show. You can do with it as you please, and you know, be you. Be I try to tell people to be yourself. However, this show, I've kind of reinvented myself. I'm putting myself out there in a more aggressive manner than I do the other shows I'm involved in. And in the beginning, I was out of my comfort zone. But, I came to this realization that these are the things I'd want to say normally that I'd probably hold back on because, I don't want to offend, brush off, piss, anybody off. And Todd's probably giggling because I piss him off all the time.
yeah, you do.
But I'm just being more realistic, more upfront, more open, And you know what, Todd, honestly, with feed drops, two things. It has shown me a new world of podcasting working on that show, that there are some awesome pieces of content being created that I
Mhm.
normally wouldn't even look for. Number one. And number two, there you I now know why there are so many podcast schools and worksheets and workbooks and books, because a lot of people, I don't know, I don't know. They have a dream they're on a podcast and they're like, oh, I can do it on my phone on this app. And they do it. And it's just like, oh my gosh, such bad audio. If you're rollerblading, pulling a barking dog on the boardwalk at the beach, that is not the time to push go live and try to do a show.
That's
And
TikTok, man.
people try to
Make a TikTok. Don't do
make a
don't do a
TikTok
podcast. Do a
instead.
TikTok.
Amen. Well, Todd, I appreciate your time. Any parting words?
You know, I'm kind of laughing. Sorry a little bit about that. Yeah, I mean, like I think just have a realistic expectation. Not everybody's Joe Rogan. You know, and you're not going to make that $1 billion contract with some sort of platform, right? God bless you if you do, and please, I more power to you. But have realistic goals when you go in and going. I would equate this to like I want to equate this like to the garage band, right? You're a garage band, and your goal at that point, until you make it big, should be to be able to open for an established concert or established group, and maybe just maybe, you could be the next Rush of podcasting. I say Rush the band, Rush not Rush the broadcaster, right? Of where you get this one hit that happens to hit in the right time, and everybody loves you, but you still stay, true to your word, and doing what you love, and being a great rock and roll band. So be Rush. Don't try to be Joel.
Awesome. Well, Mr. DeVoe, you have a rocking weekend. Oh, one last question.
Yeah.
When's the last time you created a TikTok?
Oh man, I was sick for the whole month of July.
Oh my God. And
No,
don't make excuses. Your
I'm not
audience
making
wants
excuses.
you for you. So create content. If you want to be a content creator, create content.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been off my game with creating TikTok because I was sick really bad. Every time I talked, I'd cough. So it would have been a terrible video. No,
Yeah.
I did put up the Disneyland fireworks just last week. So last week. All
Awesome. All right, Todd,
right.
you rock the
Talk to
weekend,
you later.
brother. Bye.
You too. Bye.
All right. So, in summary, you need a spreadsheet. You need to track your data. For example, when I started off, there were a few things I didn't include: your mailing list, your newsletter, your web traffic, your social media account audiences, your audio downloads, your video downloads. All of that are indicators to the growth, strength, and loyalty of your audience. So create that spreadsheet. Back in the day, I used to create templates, and what I've learned is if I give you a template, you're going to go, awesome, I need to do this. And it just gets deprioritized. If you want your show to grow, you need to have metrics. You need to understand what works and what doesn't work. And in the world that I grew up in, if you can't measure it, you don't do it, because you're just wasting effort on something you're never going to know if it works or not. So I encourage you to do just that. Open up Excel or Google Sheets or whatever it is you want to use, and create a simple tracking spreadsheet, and create those formulas at the bottom so they'll just auto calculate for you, and figure out what it is you are doing right and what it is you are doing wrong. That is all I have for you this week. Listen, go forth, create some awesome content, rock your weekend, and we will see you next week.